Hi everyone, this is Lisa with Montessori Outdoors and Joie de Vivre Force and Nature School. I really wanted to talk about this amazing book that I read. This is going to be a very controversial video because I'm talking about a controversial play subject, which is boys, mostly boys, playing with guns, weapons, and war and like superhero play. So, at a lot of places, due to the high prevalence of gun use in our society, there has been a zero policy placed in daycare centers, not allowing boys and girls to create guns, make them for crafts, do any kind of like good or bad, good superhero, bad guy, whatever, bad girl superhero play, war games, anything like that. It's just like a zero policy. Like if anything, if they start to do it, it's just like no. So I've also experienced this. I just shut it down anytime that they were they're trying to make guns. Constantly they're trying to make guns. And they're trying to create weapons. And they want to be like a Viking. And they want to be Spider-Man and everything. And I just, based on my the advice of my directors, I had to basically stop it and shut it down and then like redirect them into something else. Right when I redirected them, I'm talking it was mostly boys, but some girls were participating in it. They would just try it more and more, and it would just get them even more interested in doing it. The more that I basically said no, the more they resisted and kept trying. So I found this book through my course. It's called We Don't Play with Guns Here, War, Weapon, and Superhero Play in the Early Years by Penny Holland. It's a debating play kind of series. And this book was really, really, really enlightening about the reality of what happens when you have a zero policy and what happens when you relax that policy. The first, I don't have any conclusions about this, and I have not actually implemented a zero policy. I haven't taken away the zero policy yet. I'm just interested to hear other people's ideas about this, about the findings from this book. So I'm just kind of summarize some of the information. The first point of information was the female bias. So the female perspective in these is because most early childhood educators are women, and we create a bit of a bias. I'm queer, so I can see the value in questioning the dominant gender of the the centers being dominated by women can lend itself to like you know girls, we're socializing girls and boys to be passive. So like for example, sitting in the circle quietly is given a gold star. Being quiet while the teacher's talking is like a gold star. If you're noisy though, and you make a weapon or you do something like loud, that's bad. So what are we saying? We're saying that we want you to be passive and like submissive. And if you're playing with a gun, even though if you're just making it in an imaginary play, that's bad. So we have to question, first of all, these biases that we have because they are dominated by females, and women can become prejudiced when it's just all. I mean, this is for all different careers where there's like male dominant, female dominant, right? So we have to be careful about how we view these things from a female perspective and be more open-minded about why predominantly boys are really interested in that type of play. So one of the other point here is children at this age are forming their gender identity, whether it's trans, whether they're queer, whether they're I'm a girl, I'm a boy. They're forming their gender identity, and this is an opportunity. We need to allow children to explore all the different types of expressions of play in order to understand who they are. So a lot of boys, for example, they really want to do superhero play because it's something that they're just exploring. And girls want to also explore that. So if we have a zero tolerance on these types of play, then we're not allowing them to explore their gender identity, right? We need to allow for that. Like, we're not gonna. I wouldn't tell a boy if he wanted to play tea party and he wanted to dress up in a dress and like wear high heels. I wouldn't tell him that's bad. I would say, sure, like, that's dramatic play center, go for it. But if a girl wants to make a gun, or a girl wants to dress up like an army suit or something, and I say, no, you can't do that, I'm actually stopping her from exploring her gender identity, right? So this is really important, is we need to not have a specific zero tolerance policy on that. The third thing that was really interesting about this book was that when the zero tolerance policy on this type of play was removed, it actually lent itself to more enhanced imaginary play. So, for example, the guns were turned into something else. If they zapped someone, they were allowed to move or something, or they turned into a tree, or they transformed into a different world. It was like the allowance of them making weapons like swords and things actually created more imaginative play, because that was their tool to that imaginary world. So when we have a zero tolerance on the things that allow kids to engage in imaginary play, we're not allowing them to possibly engage in any imaginative play at all. That was another finding. These are all based on empirical studies that they did, where a bunch of centers dropped their zero tolerance policy, by the way. The other thing that was really interesting was just the idea that we're actually so the two things that they also said was that I found really interesting was when they asked the kids who were the baddies, the goodies and the baddies, most of the kids said that the baddies were like ghosts and monsters and imaginary things. It wasn't ever that they were using the guns against another student. If that did happen, they created a boundary that the kids had to follow, where they weren't allowed to point the gun at anyone or the weapon. They had to use an imaginary type of person. So those were some of the really interesting things that came up when I read this. I found it really an important read for me, because I was really questioning like why we were just having a zero tolerance policy on this type of play. I understand the context has changed in our world with guns and violence. I do think that we still need to question, though, what kind of play we're allowing in play centers, and if children at such a young age are having a zero tolerance policy is the best thing. Perhaps we need to change the boundaries of this type of play, question it, do more studies. There's more studies that should come out about this. I still have not formulated my conclusions on it. It was just a really good read, and it made me question my own perspective about this type of play. So again, it's called We Don't Play with Guns Here, War, Weapon, and Superhero Play in the Early Years by Penny Holland. And I recommend this read. It's very enlightening, and just for opening up your mind about this topic, especially if you're doing forest and nature school and risky play, because this comes up a lot with sticks being swords and things like that. And that's it. So that was my review of this book, and I hope you enjoyed that, and I look forward to your comments below. My resources are on Teachers Pay Teachers, Montessori Outdoors, and my website is forestjoiedevivre.fns.com, which is my forest and nature school. Bye.